Picture this: a burned-out school, whispers in the dark, and four friends stepping inside. Buckle up, this is gonna get spooky. On the outskirts of town stood an old school that no one had set foot in for years. Once a vibrant place filled with bright students and remarkable achievements, it had been reduced to ashes one mysterious night in a fire no one could fully explain. The details of what happened inside remained a mystery. Ever since that night, the school's ruins had become a cursed sight, a place people avoided even mentioning. Local legends claimed that some students had been trapped inside during the blaze and never escaped, yet their spirits lingered, wandering the school's dark hallways. Those who passed by the ruins at night swore they heard screams, saw fleeting shadows, or caught whispers drifting through the air. Some even said they glimpsed pale faces flickering in the windowless walls, vanishing as quickly as they appeared. One day, four friends obsessed with the paranormal, Chris, Emily, Mike, and Ashley, decided to investigate the rumors for themselves. Armed with cameras, flashlights, and a few notebooks, they entered the school at midnight. At first, everything seemed ordinary. Dust-covered desks, rusted lockers, and old carvings etched into the walls greeted them. Someone had scratched "Don't Forget Us" into a chalkboard, but it felt like a harmless relic of the past. As they ventured deeper, though, the air grew heavy, and the silence gave way to an eerie hum. In one classroom, they discovered a message scratched into the wall. "Don't forget us, we're still here." While Mike recorded it, a sudden movement flashed across the camera screen. For a brief moment, the pale face of a child appeared in the corner, eyes hollow, lips faintly curled. When they spun around, nothing was there. Ashley muttered, "It's just a reflection," but her trembling voice betrayed her doubt. Fear began to creep in, and the group decided to leave, but the path they'd taken in had vanished. The hallways seemed darker, narrower, more oppressive. Doors slammed shut on their own, and faint footsteps echoed from a distance. Emily suddenly screamed. Something had grabbed her ankle tight. She looked down to see only the dusty floor, though a red, finger-like mark lingered on her skin. No one had touched her. In a panic, they scrambled to find an exit. Chris stumbled into what used to be the principal's office. The creaking door revealed dusty shelves, lined with old student records. He found a list of the students who died in the fire: Alice, Thomas, Margaret, and at the bottom, Emily. Emily's face drained of color. Her birth year was a decade after the fire. How could this be? Just then, the walls reverberated with chilling whispers. "Stay with us. Forever." At that moment, a door burst open with a deafening crash, and a charred, blackened hand reached out from the shadows. Screaming, the group bolted. Mike and Ashley managed to find the front entrance and stumbled outside, gasping for air. When they turned back, Chris and Emily were gone, swallowed by the school. The next day, townsfolk searched the ruins for the missing pair, but there was no trace, no sound, no sign. Chris and Emily had vanished as if they'd never existed. Days turned to weeks with no word. Then, one night, a strange video surfaced on an unknown YouTube channel. The camera lay abandoned in a dark hallway, still recording. Only the wind's howl and faint creaks filled the silence. In the final seconds, a pale-faced child approached the lens, its eyes glinting in the dark. It whispered, "Now we are four." When the video cut out, rumors spread among viewers. Some swore they saw two familiar silhouettes in the background of the last frame: Chris and Emily, standing motionless in the gloom. After that night, a few kids in town began recounting dreams of wandering the school's halls, watched by four shadowy figures. The school's curse was no longer just a legend. It had become the town's living nightmare. 4 went in, 2 came out, and the school still stands, silent but alive. What do you think happened to them? Let me know in the comments. The old school on the edge of town had been abandoned long ago, its halls left to rot. Once filled with the laughter of children, it now echoed only with the howl of the wind. Its walls had crumbled, its windows shattered, and its roof sagged under the weight of time. But there was a story whispered among the townsfolk. On certain nights, precisely at midnight, the school bell would ring. The eerie part? The building had been without power for years, and there was no one inside to ring it. Most dismissed it as a legend until Liam and his friends decided to uncover the truth. Liam, Jake, and Sarah were the town's young thrill seekers. Their fascination with the paranormal had drawn them to that cursed place. On a chilly Friday night, armed with flashlights, a voice recorder, and an old map, they slipped through the school's rusted gate. The air was cold, and the moonlight barely pierced through the thick clouds. As they stepped inside, they were hit by the musty smell of dust and the sight of old graffiti scrawled across the walls. "This place used to be alive," Sarah murmured, shining her flashlight on a broken locker. The classrooms were a mess. Desks overturned, chalkboards cracked, and faded textbooks scattered across the floor. Everything carried the stillness of abandonment, until that moment arrived. Right at midnight, a deep metallic clang filled the building, the school bell. All 3 froze in place. This can't be real," Jake stammered, his flashlight trembling as he swept it around. The sound seemed to come from everywhere at once, near one moment, distant the next. In a panic, they raced to the main door, but it had locked itself shut despite being left open when they arrived. Liam pounded on it, but the heavy steel wouldn't budge. Sarah pulled out her phone, checking the screen. No signal, and even the clock had stopped, displaying only a blank void. Then, from the far end of the hallway, they heard it. Slow, rhythmic footsteps. They aimed their flashlights down the corridor and saw a tall, shadowy figure. It looked like an old teacher, stooped posture, long, thin arms, and deliberate steps. Its face was hidden in the darkness, but its presence made the air feel thicker. "Who are you?" Liam shouted, but there was no reply, just silence and the sound of approaching steps. Terrified, Jake darted into the nearest classroom. He slammed the door shut and pressed his back against the wall, holding his breath as he scanned the room. Unlike the chaos outside, this classroom was strangely orderly. The desks were neatly arranged, and the chalkboard bore the faded words, "Class begins," in shaky handwriting. But what chilled him to the bone were the figures seated at the desks. Ghostly students, dressed in outdated uniforms, long skirts for the girls, buttoned jackets for the boys. They sat motionless, heads slightly bowed. Yet their eyes, blank white eyes, were fixed on Jake. He wanted to scream, but his voice caught in his throat. Then he heard a faint creak behind the door, and the shadowy figure's silhouette appeared in the frosted glass. Meanwhile, Sarah and Liam were desperately searching for an exit in the hallway. Fleeing from the shadowy figure, they turned a corner, only to confront something worse. A burned, faceless man stood before them. His body was blackened like charcoal, his hands trembling faintly. He slowly raised his head and whispered in a deep, rasping voice, "Class isn't over." The words echoed as if they were coming from the walls themselves. At that moment, the bell rang again, louder, more insistent. The lights flickered, though there was no power to make them work. Then everything plunged into darkness, their flashlights dying for a split second. The next morning, a few townsfolk passing by the school noticed something odd. At the main entrance, Liam and Sarah's shoes sat neatly side by side. as if someone had placed them there with care. But their owners were nowhere to be found. Jake, too, had vanished without a trace. The police searched, the town buzzed with rumors, but no one uncovered anything. From that night on, the school bell continued to ring every midnight. Some kids in town began recounting dreams of wandering the school's halls, watched by shadowy figures. A few more daring souls ventured inside over the years, but they never returned. Word spread that somewhere in the school was a classroom, a lesson that never ends, and those who join it never leave. Class never ends for those lost souls. The school's still waiting. Paranormal never stops in Joseph City. Like, subscribe, and tell me what you think happened in the comments.